What's up guys, it's your boy Senron. In my last video I talked about resistance reduction, resistance penetration and lethality in League of Legends and how they can be used to negate armor and magic resistance. I briefly made notice of status effects and how they either positively or negatively impact your performance. In this video I'll cover the importance of buffs, debuffs and crowd control and how to efficiently combine them to make your enemies rage quit.
How? How did they think that was okay to even put it in the game? I'm so sick of this fucking company. They're trash! Fix the game! It sucks playing the shit! And I'm fucking addicted! So I can't quit!
Don't worry, I know that this is one of my videos, but there won't be any NSFW gay jokes about the word buff here, because that would be too easy. A buff in League is any status effect given to a unit that empowers their performance. That might sound a bit vague, so allow me to specify it a bit better. Indefinite buffs are empowerments that last throughout the entire game. A great example of an indefinite buff are Cho'Gath feast stacks. Whenever Cho'Gath kills a unit with his ultimate ability, he permanently gains bonus max health. And no matter what Cho'Gath does after last hitting something with his ultimate, he will never lose the stacks he has collected. Another mechanic that falls into the lines of permanent buffs are drakes. Each drake slain provides the killer's team with a permanent buff, and once 4 drakes are slain by one team, with a permanent dragon soul as well. Don't get too confused now. I'll cover dragons and what they do fairly soon in a separate video. For now, just know that killing this thing makes you stronger forever. Or until the surrender call comes through. Certain buffs fall into the lines of being indefinite as well, but only until a certain criterion is met. Garen's passive, for example, provides bonus health regeneration until he receives damage. If Garen, for whatever reason, never takes damage, he wouldn't lose his passive effect. But because it would be very, very unlikely for a Garen player not to take any unnecessary damage, one could make the mistake and confuse it for a so-called temporary buff. Most temporary buffs fall into the category of stat increases or heals and shields. Almost every single champion in the game has some way of casting enhancement on either themselves or others, and those who can't might temporarily get stronger through item effects, runes, or summoner spells. The cleverly named Enchanter class, or Peel supports, is the staple class when it comes to empowering their allies, with most of them having access to a shield, heal, and stat increase ability. But why would I want to help others, Senron? I'm a bronze 2 Yasuo OTP, and I can't climb because my teammates are such noobs. Tell me something that helps me hypercarry, Senron, please. Senron, I'm slam stuck in elo because of my trash teammates, and not because I'm trash. Please, Senron, please. The opposite of a buff is called a debuff. Debuffs are any status effects given to units that negatively impact their performance. Debuffs can lower a unit's stats, deal damage, or disable someone altogether, although only for a temporary moment or upon death. Statistical debuffs are just as simple as statistical buffs, whereas stat buffs give you more raw power, stat debuffs just weaken you. An example here is Tryndamere W, Mocking Shout, which decreases enemy champions' attack damage and movement speed so long as they're not facing him. Damage debuffs are either marks, dots, or modifications. Marks?
Hello everybody, my name...
Marks are a bit difficult to explain. Essentially, marks are applied either through champion abilities or basic attacks and act as either a damage amplifier or as a target for a recast ability. LeBlanc's Q, Sigil of Malice, and Lee Sin's Q, Sonic Wave, pretty much explain all that marks do. DOTS, or DOTS, stands for damage over time. A damage over time effect is an effect that, well, deals damage over a certain amount of time, hence the name. Damage modifications are effects that enhance incoming damage types. Vladimir's ultimate ability Hemoplague, for example, has a modification effect that makes units hit by his ultimate ability take more damage until the effect ends.
Debuffs, schmebuffs, Senron. This is boring. The only debuff I have are my eating teammates when I play Yasuo. Please talk about something I can relate to. Okay, thanks, bye.
Okay, I can do that. So, let's talk about disabilities. I mean disables. Disables are known in-game as crowd control, and almost every champion has some way of disabling enemy players. Crowd control is separated into two categories, those being total and partial crowd control. The following segment is going to be heavily informative, so expect less jokes. Partial crowd control, commonly known as soft crowd control, are disabling effects that partially impact the control over one's champion. They are cleansable by both QSS and cleanse, unless stated otherwise. The most prominent form of soft CC are slows. A unit that has been slowed has a reduced movement speed, which makes dodging skill shots or kiting a lot harder. Cripples reduces the affected unit's attack speed. Cripples are quite rare, mostly because it's annoying to play against a champion that has access to this form of crowd control. Units that are blinded will miss their basic attacks on whatever they are attacking. Missed basic attacks will fail to deal damage or apply on-hit effects, except for some special basic attacks. Blinds are especially frustrating against champions that rely on their basic attacks to deal damage. So if you want to piss off your ADC main friend in a 1v1, pick Teemo. Champions under the grounded effect are unable to use movement-related abilities or summoner spells. Sounds whack, but a well-placed Cassiopeia W could potentially change the outcome of a game. A nearsighted champion has a reduced vision radius and the inability to gain vision from allied units or wards. A prime example of a champion whose whole kit revolves around his enemies not seeing shit is Nocturne. Nearsight can't be cleansed by cleanse, but can be cleansed by QSS. Disarmed units are unable to perform basic attacks. It's essentially a better version of blinds. Silenced champions are unable to cast their abilities or summoner spells except if they would cleanse the silence off of them. Silenced players, however, are still able to move and basic attack. Disrupts interrupt all channeled and charged abilities. They're essentially just weaker silences. Lulu is currently the only champion with a polymorph ability, and boy, is it annoying. Essentially, it's a combination of a silence and disarming effect, meaning that when Lulu turns you into the animal you are, you're only able to move around helplessly. Champions that are affected by a drowsy applying spell will first be slowed. After a short time, they will fall asleep, stunning them. If the stunned target receives damage, it'll instantly wake up and remove the remaining duration of the stun. But it's better to cleanse the effect before the stun sets in, or to quickly position yourself better to avoid dying. Just like with Polymorph, there's currently only one champion that has access to an ability with the kinematics effect, that champion being Rel. A unit that is under the effect of kinematics will continuously be pulled to a specific location against its will. Leaving the ability's range, for example with Flash, will stop the pull as long as you don't re-enter it. Kinematics can't be cleansed. Champions hit by snares or roots are unable to control their movement and are stuck in the position where they were hit by the effect until it times out or is cleansed. However, champions hit by snares or roots are still able to basic attack and use their abilities. Total crowd control, commonly known as hard crowd control, are disabling effects that completely remove the control over one's champion. They are cleansable by both QSS and cleanse, unless stated otherwise. The most prominent hard CC are stuns. Units that are stunned simply can't attack, use abilities, move or activate items as long as they aren't able to remove crowd control. Hey, this one's for you. Airborne, also known as knockups, will throw you into the air. Just like with stuns, a player affected by the airborne effect will be unable to control their champion's movement or abilities. It can neither be cleansed by cleanse nor QSS, but can be partially removed by specific champion abilities such as Gangplank's W. Also, for the memo, you don't really cleanse the knockup itself, but you cleanse an effect called suspension, which is essentially just a mix between a stun and the airborne effect. In all honesty, you're just stuck in the air for a couple of seconds longer. Forced actions disable the control over a player's champion and force it to a specific task, depending on which action is enforced. Currently, there are 4 different types of forced actions. Champions affected by charms move towards the source, but won't attack it. Champions affected by taunts move towards the source, but will attack it with basic attacks. Champions affected by Berserk attack anything within a 1000 range radius around them, prioritizing allies before enemies. And finally, champions affected by Fear will directly flee from the source. Stasis is the effect you get when you use Stopwatch or Zhonya's Hourglass. It's uncleansable, but units affected by stasis are unable to be targeted and are invulnerable to any damage. Sounds overpowered, but keep in mind that players under the stasis effect have no control over their champion as well. And last, but not least, are suppressions. Suppressed units are basically just stunned. What's interesting, however, is that the suppressor himself has limited access to their own abilities or movement during their suppressing ability. Malzahar's R, Nether Grasp, for example, applies a 2.5 second long suppression on his target. However, if he moves or uses another ability, his suppression is cancelled and the victim can move and attack freely again. Suppressions can't be removed by cleanse, but can be removed by QSS. To counter many types of crowd control, one must purchase Tenacity. Tenacity, or crowd control reduction, is a stat that reduces the duration of all crowd control status effects except airborne, drowsy, nearsight, stasis, and suppression. Currently, these are the only items, consumables, champion abilities, and runes that provide you with Tenacity. And that's pretty much it. There's a little bit more detail in certain crowd controlling effects, but nothing too noteworthy for this video. I'll address them if specifically needed separately, but for now this should do. In my next video, I'll cover dragons and their importance in modern League of Legends.
Senron, put your dick away, Senron. I'm not having sex with you right now, Senron.